guardian litem is playing like she's helping me. And one of the statements that she's made to me was, you have to understand, you're probably not going to win. So you want to do whatever you can to get as much time with your daughter as you can. Why am I not going to win? Why do you assume I'm not going to win? Well, the judge doesn't like military people. So,
Well,
and
that's funny because during the first restraining order, when I filed for a divorce, I got the restraining placed on me. That's one of the things that the commissioner here in Wisconsin said. Because you are a prior Marine and how you guys are trained is probably the indication why I'm going to cite on the air of caution. Now, when I ordered my transcripts, that whole section was taken
left out.
out.
Yeah,
And so then I questioned the guardian ad litem, and even he said, I can't believe she even put this on you. There's no claims of anything, of any allegations is all false, or at least hearsay. So, but then I look at other people, and like your case, for an example, I didn't look into your case at all, but most of the people that I've actually looked into, a lot of the prior military are the ones that are actually, one, putting up a really good fight, exposing it, but they're also being jailed. And that brings me up to this guy's website. There's not one indicator that promotes violence. There's anything but fact throughout his entire his website, and plus his video is just stating the facts. And so the sheriff themselves actually have the authority, to actually protect him. And the sheriffs actually put themselves in a void where they exempt themselves from actually following the Constitution. So it brings me back when you and I first went in there, we raised up our right hand and did the role play of to defend this Constitution from foreign and
right.
domestic. And here, these guys are doing the same thing. The judges, the attorneys have also said similar oaths, and yet they're breaking their own oath. And the attorneys themselves, they're not there for people like you and I. They're there to support the government, the courts, and then you. So your
Right.
attorneys pulling out is no different than my attorneys pulling out of my case. They did the same thing. But then they use this as a ploy for other attorneys. So when a new attorney comes in, they're looking at this and they're like, oh my God, they're overwhelmed. Who did I actually accept this retainer for this person sitting in front of me? And then they're very cautious in how they talk to you. So I come to the idea of, well, I'm going to record these people because they're telling me one thing, and then on the flip side, they're doing something completely different. And so
Right.
when I created videos recording people, the sheriffs, the police, and the corruption within their own organizations, now that's when my website became an issue.
Right.
That's where I
Right.
got the tyranny concept of if you don't take this stuff down, and this is during the harassment, is that we're going to put you in jail for 1 year.
Exactly. I mean, and it goes back to your point earlier where you said we have this First Amendment right of freedom of speech, but you only have the freedom, to speak freely until somebody says they didn't like what you heard or what they heard, and
But
then they
that's
take
the
that.
that's the responsibility of the sheriff. They're the ones that have the hold that county jail. They're the ones that are in the courtroom sitting there. They're not there for you. They're the ass kissers of the judge.
Exactly.
They
Exactly.
actually lost their own integrity. And
I have.
believe it or not, if you go to a regular sheriff and ask them of the Constitution or the Bill of Rights, they don't know Article 5. They don't know the amendment for number 10, and so you question it, were you were prior military? Yeah, I was Army National Guard. But yet you're a sheriff and you don't know the right to bear arms. What
Right.
amendment does that fall under? Oh, I don't know. So when they're instant willing obedience to orders, and they're willing to unarm American soldiers like they did in Katrina, during that hurricane, they went to door to door. Marines did that. Army National Guard did that. They are an oath breaker. There was no need to disarm that population. In fact, the ones that they disarmed are the ones who got raped and murdered on top of that, but they don't air that on the news. They
Right.
just want to say that they're doing what they were told. It's almost like a mini martial
That's
law.
that's the mantra that got me so frustrated. You got to go from agency to agency to agency. My daughter was in harm's way. I'm trying to get her help. You can't call 911. They're going to refer you to the Children's Abuse Hotline. You call the Children's Abuse Hotline, and they have, from being in the military, they have a flow chart that they go through. If it's yes, you go here. No, you go here. And yes, they try to piece it together that way. But you realize I had to call the child abuse hotline numerous times on my ex for situations that she had my daughter in. So I'm a veteran of that system, and I realized they have a flow chart that's basically trying to get that person off the call. They're not trying to listen and do something. And so, I got so frustrated. I'm like, we need one number to call. There's 911. People know you call 911 for an emergency, 411 for information. We need a number to call for, this, because this is a rampant, epidemic that's across the nation. People need to be able to pick up the phone if there's something wrong with the situation. The mother, the father, whoever is creating a situation that puts their child in harm's way. You shouldn't have to go through all these different channels, and then somebody saying it's civil, another person saying it's did you call the cops? You call the cops, and the cops tell you, well, this is a civil matter, you need to bring this back to court. And then they pick and choose, like you said, when they're going to apply one or the other. And you go to the sheriff's deputy. I had a sheriff friend of mine. He was a friend of mine before he became sheriff. As a matter of fact, I had direct involvement in getting him elected as sheriff in the county that he was in. I used to be a newspaper reporter in that county. I used to go out on busts, drug busts and everything, and I reported in the paper for these guys, and they look like heroes to the community. We're doing all this to protect the community. So the previous sheriff, this guy was the major at the time. Sheriff leaves. Obviously, the major moves up, becomes sheriff. So now, move forward to the time that they were going in and investigating the significant other, the ex, has my child in harm's way. Family Services goes in and investigates the home because there's reason to believe that there's drugs there. Her 16-year-old daughter called a hotline to turn her in because there were drugs all over the home. We're not talking just your simple marijuana, or, people want to downplay it like, oh, maybe it was just marijuana. We're talking methamphetamine. This woman was manufacturing, possessing, and distributing this. She was using my child as a mule. She would stuff the drugs inside a child's stuffed animal and send her to a friend's house. Don't forget to take your stuffed animal, honey. And make matters, is the irony of the situation is, there's a stuffed animal that I bought my daughter as a gift a long time ago. You want to make sure that you take daddy's stuffed animal with you. And on top of which, the information that I got from the oldest child was that she refused to ever touch it. Like, she knew that, like, some sort of, it was bad, mojo if she touched that. It had to be somebody else. No, you go get it. You go get it, and, make sure you take it with you. Anyway, long story short, that sheriff, friend of mine, when all this transpired, and, I'm waiting to see the arrest charges against the mother for all this drug paraphernalia, drugs and distribution and everything like that, it never materialized. So when I went back and called my buddy, he's the one that let me know all those years ago that she was residing with a sex offender. That's another story. Yeah, I mean, just goes and goes. So when I go back to the sheriff and I say, hey, listen, why is it that they never press charges against her? I don't understand that. And he goes, who are we talking about? I'm like, come on. We've been talking about this for a long time. You know exactly what I'm talking about. What's the deal here? And he goes, I don't know. I'm going to have to check the records on that. I'm like, okay, that's fine. One thing I want to know is, how comes the deputy that was involved in the investigation is no longer with your agency? And he goes, oh, well, she decided to take leave of absence. I found out that she was transferred to Texas. I'm like, okay. So why is it that the mother was never charged with anything? I mean, just off the top of your head, without having to look into things any further, why was she never charged with anything? And to this day, I don't have that answer. But I have an indication, because when we did a deposition hearing so many years ago, because the mother refused to answer the interrogatories of my attorney. So my attorney said, that's fine. We'll just have a deposition hearing. She's got to answer every question that we ask in a deposition hearing. So I threw in the question, were you a confidential informant for the county? Because I had reason to believe the reason why she wasn't getting charged with anything. I mean, this woman should have been incarcerated a long time ago. She should have had a rap sheet a mile long. And instead, I'm having to try to prove these things in court
Mhm.
to have them dismissed. We don't allow discovery. If we don't allow discovery, guess what? We don't get to admit any of this information. So here it is, your deposition hearing. I have my attorney ask her point blank, were you a confidential informant for said county? Yes. And that said it all right there. The reason why the sheriff turned his back on a friend,
Mhm.
and you put my child in harm's way
Mhm.
to protect somebody that was helping to feed you information on the drugs that
Mhm.
you have running through your county. And that's what's happening too. That's another area that needs to be explored. These confidential informants are being granted. I mean, she had a green light to do anything that she wanted to do.
Well, it's even further than that. A lot of them get incentivized community to
Right.
community to bring lower income into these other communities. And as long as they keep their job for 24 hours or a week or whatever, they will collect welfare for that community or from
Right.
that community. And they'll get for every dollar they get for welfare, the federal government reassures them by that backing. So these private entities that are part of it for the communities actually tearing itself apart. But using your kids as leverage. Now, if the situation was reversed, they would be coming down on your door and they'd be stripping it, just like this
Mr. Prince.
Paulson. $2,500 jail bond because he has a so-called quote strong personality
Two
about
hundred
him.
fifty thousand.
Oh, it's 250,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, for
Twenty five
posting a
hundred to two
video and
hundred
has a
fifty
website.
thousand.
And it kind of it's a wake up for me because what he had to produce on his website is things that I have on blogs. I've posted on Facebook. I have my own website. I
Is
even
that
have Parents
is that a
Against Court
knock?
Corruption.
Is that a knock on the door?
No, not yet. I'm waiting for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's
So
hope it doesn't come to that. I mean,
but
but
being a soldier and me being a Marine, I would have a hard time being instant willing obedience to the orders, and that brings me back to the day that I was in the Marine Corps, and we had this survey that we had to write and fill out. And one of the questions was, would you ever disarm or shoot at unarmed American citizens if you were commanded to? And I remember then, and I'm like, well, no, you don't put your name, your social security number on there or anything. And I went back because I was a squad leader at the time, and I asked some of the guys, I don't care what you guys answered on there, of which ones you guys did for this particular question. But I tell you what, if you would ever shoot at unarmed Americans or any citizen from any country, because your commanding officer told you, I'd take my 9 mil and I will shoot you right in the head. In fact, I'll be the one that throws that American flag in a pyramid and throw it right at your parents and say, "Your son broke his oath. He is not fighting for the free person." Because the idea of a soldier or a Marine, and you know this, is to help the people that can't help themselves. So
exactly.
that's why you're there. You're their bodyguard. And what they're doing is they're taking these military people, they're disassembling them mentally, and they're not able to actually think on their own. Especially today's soldier and today's Marine isn't when it was 20 years ago when we were both in. They're completely different. They're evolving them to be more supportive to this communist state that we're living in.
It's funny. It's funny you mentioned that because I have a similar remembrance when I was in the service. I was in 1990 to 1993 during the first Persian Gulf War, right? And basic training, they were, you're all hooah, bring us into this area. We didn't know what was going on. And they had like this faux Russian general at the front of the stage, and I have our entire battalion in there, right? And this faux Russian general up there, bad mouthing the United States, saying everything he possibly could that's so nasty against the United States, and everybody's getting all riled up, and I'm looking around like, are you guys buying this? Are you really buying this? I mean, and you look around, and you start to realize, wow, how many people are indoctrinated to believe certain propaganda that they're being fed,
Mm-hmm.
and it's sad because that moment sticks with me all these years later when I look back and I say, yeah, the sheep do follow the shepherd,
Mm-hmm.
and there's so many shepherds out there that are trying to lead them, people need to wake up. Otherwise, you're going to be led to the slaughter. You
Oh,
know,
just remember, the government got you from analog to digital, and they care about what you watch. So they did that conversion box of 90 million plus dollars to do that. But if you follow the United Nations, they're doing this the same exact thing here in the States that they've been doing overseas. And what the United Nations is doing is, separating the children from the parent,
right,
or the
right.
parents in some so-called extreme cases. And they're doing the same thing overseas in other countries that they're doing right here. So it's forming into like a world type government, if that makes any sense. Because
It
if
does
you,
make a lot of sense, and you have to, then we start to tip into them labeling us as conspiracy theorists.
Mhm.
We're like, no, and I have a quote somewhere. I got so much documentation, but somebody described, conspiracy theorists as somebody that's just bringing the truth to light, and then you're labeled that way because they don't want you to believe the truth. They don't want you to look at the truth.
Mhm.
Look over here. I'm a magician. Look over here, and I'm going to do whatever I got to do over here. And that's people need to just make themselves more aware. You
Mhm.
know, when somebody says something, if you see it on the mainstream media, you hear somebody of power speaking. I always take it like, okay, what did they say? And then try to figure out if what they said matches what's really going on in the world. It takes a lot, and
Mhm.
that's why people spend lots of time watching TV just to escape. But you really have to kind of look at what's really going on out there. And
Mhm.
like you said, we're trying to build this one world government, so to
Mhm.
speak, and you say that, and next thing you know, you're getting knocks on the door,
Mhm.
because you're trying to raise awareness for people to wake up.
But
Mr. Paulson said, to me, he said, listen, I got to do something. And I'm like, you're aware of the ramifications if you do, right? And he knew. I mean, and the attorney that tried to discredit him to me personally, you know, I don't know this attorney. Why did you call me out of the blue? And he seemed kindly enough to offer me some advice. You may want to back off. You may not want to attach yourself to this guy's got a history of violence. I'm like, that's what I'm trying to find out. I believe there's two sides to every story, but I also do, if he was in fact arrested for just simply posting a website that made a few, I can't really tell if there's nothing on that website that says to me that it's not factual. So it seems to me that there was a leap from what he was arrested for, threatened violence, to what is on his website. Now, if they were going with what he's done in the past in his history, well, I got to see the police report. I got to see the arrest warrant to kind of, see what they were really arresting him for. And if that's the case, then, I'll say that's the case.
Mhm.
But as of right now, there's a leap of faith, from website to threatens violence.
very interesting. And the thing is that in his condition, or even yours and what you've seen, you think that friends that were really good friends and before any of this stuff happened, they would stick by you. But then they start seeing what things are going on with you. There must be a fluke. But it even goes deeper than that. Family will start doing that same thing.
Yep. Yep. I've been alienated from my family. I've had a few that stuck with me. The things that carried me through in my case. I mean, if I had any other job, there's no way that I could have went. They would have allowed me to go to Missouri and from Pennsylvania. That's 1,000 miles. I drove out there every time. I must have taken 30 trips out there. So we're talking 60 round trip to trips, 60,000 miles driving back and forth to make sure that I attend. I went out there in a snowstorm to make sure that I made it to a hearing. I got to the hearing. My attorney who lives in Missouri did not. I drove 1,000 miles and I got here. How comes you're not here?
Mm-hmm.
And so the things that we do, and I say all that because it's like, it's the dedication that I made and I was allowed to make to my case. I know a lot of people out there don't have the ability to do that because, you can't take a few days at a time to go attend to your situation, you know, and how many people would still have their jobs after being incarcerated twice,
Hmm.
so I have to give props. I answer to one person at my company. I'm the operations manager. He's the owner, and apparently I've done my job so well that he realizes that yes, this is a fight so that you can come back, and eventually my fight allowed me to come back with my daughter for good. And that was a cross country trip from Pennsylvania to Arizona when the mother absconded in the very last stages of this fight. She
Hmm.
absconded to Arizona, and I had to drive all the way out there to pick up my daughter. And the fondest memory that I have of that trip is my daughter calling me and crying because she's so happy that her daddy's coming to save her.
Mm.
And I asked her, I go, honey, 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 why are you crying? She goes, oh, daddy, they're happy tears. So it's something that I carry with me. The fight. You have to just maintain the fight. And I think, Mr. Paulson, I think, he's doing whatever he can because he realizes that, you back somebody in the corner, right?
Hmm.
And you back them in the corner so much, they're left with two things: to take what's coming at them or to fight back. And that's where a lot of these parents are these days. We're just trying to figure out, first of all, there's this crazy zany ruling. How did the person that shouldn't be caring for the best interest of the child,
Hmm.
how did they? I mean, they put my daughter in the home of a sex offender. They put my daughter in the home of a drug abuser. They put my daughter in the home. The mother didn't even have a home. She had no residence. I go out to try to get an emergency hearing to speak with the judge. They refuse me that. And, all the while, I'm coming back to Pennsylvania and I get pulled over in West Virginia. They lock me up in the West Virginia County Jail so that they could get my daughter back with the mother. She had no place to live. Where were they taking her to?
Hmm.
And, then she goes back and she's living with the sex offender again. And, long story short, you just got to keep fighting, and people are afraid, I'm going to get locked up or I'm going to get this. You just, if the truth will eventually set these people free,
Hmm.
you know, and you keep bringing the truth, keep bringing the truth. What one attorney said to me, one of the main things that you have to look for in an attorney is one that's not afraid to go to trial. You can't have these attorneys that are trying to negotiate and plea everything, because obviously those are the ones that are, able to succumb to a backdoor deal. They're the ones that are easily influenced. If
Hmm.
you have an attorney that's willing, we'll take this to trial. Even if you don't have the money to do so, you throw the fear out there that you're gonna take this as far as it's gonna go. I had the same judge that had me incarcerated a second time. He was the judge that was hearing my custody case. So they have my criminal case one day, they have my custody case another day. I'm coming from Pennsylvania. So they think they're slick. Like I'm not going to be able to handle this. There's nobody in the world that's going to be able to maintain their job. We're going to get this guy. But they didn't realize that I had people out back here that were backing me.
Hmm.
So I go out for the criminal hearing, and he recuses himself from that case. Well, I can't hear this because obviously I have a conflict of interest. And so then later we have the custody case, and I ask him, so are you going to recuse yourself from this case as well because of the conflict of interest? No, this is my case. I'm not going anywhere. And so, you had to stand and fight. What we're going to do. I
Right.
tried to go pro se, and he basically, tipped his hat on that. He's like, any evidence that you produce is all hearsay because if it's not done the proper, way, obviously they're going to throw it out.
Yeah,
So,
but in family court, it's very hard to appeal that.
oh
Most
yeah,
of the appeals are actually thrown out. And
right.
even if you follow, and counties have different rules and regulations in the state, but I have never seen an appeal actually take suit and actually follow through the right procedures, even by county level, where it actually went through when it comes to family court. They see it's family court, they totally object to it, and nope, you misspelled a word and done. It's,
Right.
you know,
Right.
I mean,
Anything.
anything. So, well, I
Well,
think, go ahead.